San Francisco International Airport, September 1972, 9:15 on a Saturday morning. The terminal was running at full volume. 6 domestic flights boarding simultaneously had turned the check-in area into the particular kind of organized chaos that airports specialize in. Luggage moving in every direction, people checking their watches every 90 seconds, the low-grade collective anxiety of travelers who are already slightly behind and have no way to fix that. The air carried jet fuel and bad coffee and the specific tension of a space where hundreds of strangers are pressed together without having chosen each other's company. The United Airlines check-in queue stretched back from the counter in a rope-guided line, roughly 20 people deep, shuffling forward in the slow, restless rhythm of people who have somewhere to be and no faster way to get there. Bruce Lee was third in line. Black leather jacket over a white shirt, dark trousers, sunglasses sitting across his face, partially obscuring it. Beside him, a gray Samsonite suitcase holding 3 days of clothing and a folder of documents for producer meetings in Los Angeles. He looked like a man who had stood in enough airport queues to have stopped fighting them, posture relaxed, weight evenly distributed, not checking his watch, not scanning the room, simply present, the way he was present in every space he occupied. A few people in the line had noticed him. Whispers moving down the queue and dissolving before they became anything louder. That's the guy from the Green Hornet. Bruce gave no indication of having heard any of it. He moved forward when the line moved forward. He was a man waiting to check a bag on a Saturday morning. Nothing more than that. The Bodybuilder arrived at 9:22. 28 years old, 6'1", 265 pounds of the specific kind of mass that 6 years of obsessive, dedicated, single-minded ironwork produces. A 52-inch chest, arms measuring 22 inches that were visibly straining the sleeves of the white tank top he was wearing, despite the September morning chill outside. The arms were the point. With men built like this, the arms are always the point. He had a face that had long since grown accustomed to a particular experience in public spaces, the small, unconscious, almost imperceptible adjustments that other people make when serious mass is moving in their direction, the way a crowd parts without being asked, the way bodies shift and create room before the mind has consciously registered the reason. He had spent 6 years interpreting this as respect. It was not respect, it was physics, the straightforward biological programming of smaller organisms registering larger ones and creating distance. He had never needed to learn the difference between fear and genuine admiration because from where he stood, in every public space he had ever moved through, the result looked identical. He was late for his flight. His companion, similarly built, similarly unconcerned with the inconvenience his size might cause others, was half a step behind him. Both men moving through the terminal with the unhurried confidence of people for whom crowds have always been something that adjusted to them, rather than the other way around. He entered the check-in queue the way a large vessel enters a narrow channel, through displacement rather than request. The first person he reached, a businessman with a briefcase, stepped aside without a word. The second, an older woman, pulled her bag to her chest and said nothing. He reached Bruce Lee and applied the same pressure, the same lateral shoulder push, the same wordless assumption that the smaller body ahead of him would recognize the logic of the situation and comply. Bruce didn't move. He shifted his weight by perhaps 2 or 3 degrees, a rotation so slight it was barely visible, and the push found nothing. No resistance, no tension, no yielding. It simply arrived and dissipated, like a wave meeting a shoreline that wasn't interested in being moved. Bruce continued looking toward the counter as though nothing had happened, because, in any sense that mattered, nothing had. The bodybuilder stopped. This had not happened before, not here, not from someone this size. He stared at the back of Bruce's head with the expression of a man whose reliable arithmetic has just produced a result that cannot be correct, and who hasn't yet decided to check his math or simply insist on his original answer. "Hey," loud enough to carry. "Big guy coming through. Move it." Bruce didn't turn immediately. He finished the thought he was in the middle of, or seemed to, and then turned slowly and completely, giving the man behind him his full, unhurried attention. The kind of attention that belongs to someone who has nothing to be afraid of, and therefore no reason to rush. He looked up at the bodybuilder from behind his sunglasses for a moment. Then he removed them, folded them with the same careful precision he applied to everything, and placed them in his jacket pocket. "The line is for everyone," he said. "Not loud, not aggressive, not performing calm, actually calm. The way a simple, obvious fact is calm. Wait your turn." The bodybuilder blinked. He had expected several possible responses from the smaller man. He had a catalog of them built across years of these moments: compliance, immediate and apologetic, nervous laughter and a sideways step, the physical yielding that his presence normally produced without requiring a single word. He had not had a response like this before, and found, unexpectedly, that the calmness of it was more disorienting than anger would have been. Anger he knew how to handle. This was something else. He ran the automatic comparison his years of gym culture had trained him to run. 140 pounds in front of him, maybe 150 with the jacket. Arms that were functional but far from remarkable. A man who should, by every physical measurement he had ever learned to trust, be stepping aside right now. "Buddy," he said, his voice carrying the slow, patient condescension of a man explaining something simple to someone who was making it unnecessarily complicated. Bruce's expression didn't change. His weight didn't shift. Nothing in his body language suggested that what he was about to say required any preparation whatsoever. "Try." One word, delivered without heat, without threat, without any of the performance that usually surrounds confrontation. An invitation offered with complete courtesy into a room the bodybuilder had no equipment to enter. The airline employee at the counter intervened with a practiced efficiency of someone trained to defuse exactly this kind of situation. "Gentlemen, no confrontations at the counter, please. Everyone will be served in order. Please maintain your positions in the queue." The bodybuilder stepped back. His ego hadn't genuinely been wounded yet, merely held in place temporarily by circumstances. He settled in behind Bruce with the specific, simmering impatience of a man who has decided that the small, unreasonable person ahead of him has only delayed the inevitable, and that the right moment to correct this situation would present itself shortly. It presented itself almost immediately. When Bruce reached the counter and lifted his suitcase onto the scale, the clasp on one side didn't catch cleanly. He had been sorting through documents while waiting in the queue and hadn't fully resecured it. The case sat on the scale slightly open, the latch visibly unset. The bodybuilder, standing directly behind him, noticed this. What followed could technically be described as an accident. A large foot moving carelessly in a crowded space, making unintentional contact with luggage on the floor. That description is available. The other description is that the bodybuilder drove his foot deliberately and with significant force into the side of Bruce's suitcase, sending it off the scale and skidding several feet across the linoleum, contents beginning to spill from the unlatched side as it went.
The clasp gave way completely. 2 shirts, a pair of training trousers, and several personal items scattered across the terminal floor of San Francisco International Airport on a Saturday morning in September 1972, spreading across the linoleum in full view of approximately 40 people who had been watching this situation develop and were now watching its latest chapter unfold in complete silence. The bodybuilder laughed. Not the involuntary laugh of someone genuinely surprised by something funny, the specific, calculated laugh of a man who has found a way to establish dominance while keeping one hand on the door marked plausible deniability. Then he turned to his companion and delivered his commentary at a volume that was not quite a shout, but was precisely loud enough to reach Bruce and everyone standing within 10 meters. "Look at the little Chinese guy picking up his garbage. Should learn not to get in the way of bigger people." His companion laughed. Several bystanders looked away. The airline employee behind the counter went very still. Bruce Lee did not react. He knelt down on the linoleum floor of the terminal and began collecting his belongings. His movements were deliberate and completely unhurried, the movements of a man who has already decided exactly how he intends to respond to this situation and sees no reason to rush the process of getting there. He picked up the first shirt and folded it, carefully, precisely, as though he were standing in his own bedroom at home with nowhere to be and all the time available. He folded the second shirt and placed it on top of the first. He retrieved the training trousers and folded those too. He picked up each remaining item individually and returned it to the suitcase with the same unhurried attention he applied to everything. The bodybuilder's laughter continued for a while. Then it began thinning at the edges. Laughter of that particular kind requires a reaction to sustain itself. Embarrassment, anger, visible discomfort, anything that confirms the intended effect has landed. Bruce was providing none of those things. The silence from the man on the floor stretched longer than expected, longer than the situation's script called for, and the laughter gradually lost the confidence that had been carrying it. The bodybuilder filled the silence with another remark to his companion, something about natural order, about certain people not understanding how the world works, but the words carried noticeably less conviction than the first ones had, and everyone within earshot could hear the difference. Bruce finished repacking his suitcase. He stood up. He pressed the clasp shut with a single clean, decisive click. Then he turned and faced the bodybuilder with the complete, unhurried attention of someone who has finished everything that needed finishing and now has nothing but time for what comes next. The 40 people who had been watching this unfold went completely quiet. The airline employee stopped typing. Even the ambient noise of the terminal seemed to pull back slightly, the way sound behaves in a large space when something is about to happen that every person present can feel approaching. Bruce spoke clearly and without performance. He didn't raise his voice. He projected through precision rather than volume, each word arriving exactly where it was aimed, landing with the weight of something that was not a threat, but a statement of available facts. "You're going to apologize, or I'm going to demonstrate why size without skill is just dead weight." The delivery of it was the delivery of a physician stating a diagnosis, calm, specific, entirely without drama. The bodybuilder stared at him. He ran the calculation his mind had been running automatically for 6 years. 5'7", 140 pounds, maybe 150 in the jacket. Arms that were functional but nowhere near impressive. He had run this calculation dozens of times in dozens of situations, and it had always produced the same answer, and the answer had always been correct. He decided this situation was not different. He smiled at his companion. Then he took one step forward and extended his right hand toward Bruce's chest. Open palm, the dominant push that establishes hierarchy without technically crossing into assault. The move that had resolved a dozen minor confrontations in his favor without him ever having to actually fight anyone. The hand never reached Bruce. What happened in the next 5 seconds was this. In the first second, Bruce's left hand met the incoming push at the wrist, not blocking it with opposing force, but redirecting it outward in a motion so fluid and economical that several witnesses would later describe it as looking like the bodybuilder's own arm had simply changed its mind about where it was going. In the second second, Bruce's right leg generated a side kick that traveled from its chambered position to the bodybuilder's solar plexus in a time the human eye cannot follow reliably.
The power behind that kick was not produced by the size of the muscles involved. It was produced by the kinetic chain, legs driving against the floor, hips rotating with full commitment, torso contracting and transferring every ounce of generated momentum through the extended leg into a contact point roughly 2 inches square, positioned at the precise anatomical location where impact is most efficiently transferred to the diaphragm. Bruce's 140 pounds focused through that chain into that point exceeded anything that 265 pounds of untrained mass could produce in a comparable movement. Physics doesn't negotiate. In the 3rd second, the impact arrived. The diaphragm went into immediate spasm. The bodybuilder's mouth opened. No sound came out because no air was moving in either direction. His hands dropped instinctively to his midsection, the ancient reflex of a body attempting to protect the site of an injury that has already fully occurred. In the 4th second, Bruce's left leg swept the bodybuilder's support leg at the precise moment when all 265 pounds of the man's weight was committed to that single leg, commitment forced by the destabilization the kick had already caused. The geometry of it was simple and absolute. Remove the only remaining support at the moment the center of gravity is already displaced, and the result is not a fall, it is a collapse, total, immediate, and completely inevitable. In the 5th second, 265 pounds of bodybuilder met the linoleum floor of San Francisco International Airport with an impact that moved through the terminal like a minor seismic event, felt in the feet and bones of every person standing within 20 feet of it. He landed flat on his back, arms and legs extended without any control over their position, completely conscious, completely unable to do anything about his current situation, which was the floor, the inability to breathe, and 40 people looking down at him from above. Bruce did not follow him down, did not stand over him, did not say a single word. He turned back to the airline counter, picked up his suitcase, and addressed the agent, who was standing with both palms flat on the counter and an expression suggesting that her training had covered many situations, but had not specifically prepared her for this. "Excuse the interruption," Bruce said. "My bag is within the weight limit." The agent looked at the scale. "Yes," she said, in the voice of someone whose mouth is operating on automatic while the rest of her mind works to catch up with what it just witnessed. 42 pounds, well within the limit. She printed the boarding pass. Her hands were not entirely steady, but she managed it. Bruce took the pass, thanked her, and walked toward the seating area with the unhurried calm of a man who has completed his check-in and has a few minutes before his flight. Behind him, the bodybuilder was beginning the slow, painful process of recovering the ability to breathe. It took nearly 2 full minutes before he could sit up. His companion crouched beside him, asking questions that couldn't be answered yet, because answering required air, and air was still arriving in shallow, difficult increments. When he finally got vertical, assisted by his companion's arm, making it to a seated position on the floor first, and then, eventually, to standing, he looked around the terminal. He was looking for Bruce. Not with any intention of continuing what had been started. That was finished, and some part of him understood it was finished in a way that couldn't be reopened. He was looking with the expression of a man who has just had a foundational belief about how the world works corrected in the most direct and efficient manner available, and who is still in the earliest stages of understanding what that correction means. For 6 years he had carried one certainty above all others, that 265 pounds of built, conditioned muscle was a reliable source of dominance in any physical situation, that the arithmetic of size was the arithmetic that mattered. That certainty was gone, removed with the same economy and precision with which everything else had just happened, quickly, cleanly, without waste, without a single unnecessary movement. What would replace it was not yet clear to him. That would take longer to find out.